Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty pinko commie soy boy cuck Antifa super soldier filter. But more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exist on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. I use she, they pronouns. I work in higher ed and run a food pantry. I care about food access, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I'm a staunch defender of Andy Garcia wielding a gilded shotgun. Sorry about it. And I like movies that prominently feature asses. So, Craig, what other pop culture are you getting into these days?
So I watched a stand-up comedy special recently, which is the stand-up comedy special of Stavy Baby, Stavros Halkias, the guy from Cumtown, which I know is a podcast that neither of us are really listeners of. But I really enjoyed his stand-up special. It's funny. It's really, really funny. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it, but what I know him from would be watching YouTube videos of what I think is like an individual podcast of his, but I don't listen to the podcast. I have watched videos of it on YouTube, where he sometimes has like other like comedians or semi-famous people on his guests, and watching videos of his stand-up that are like recorded live on YouTube. So I'm acquainted with his stand-up, though I have not watched this particular special. What stood out about it for you?
He's just well, first off, I like that he's kind of the answer to like idiots like Joe Rogan and Adam Carolla and all these people who talk about how like PC culture, you can't say anything, you can't, you're gonna get canceled. And I think Stavros, who's like really filthy and really gross and like kind of just very id driven, so like a lot of his like jokes are just very like primitive and just like but he touches really dicey subjects, but he does it in a way that is first off funny and second off not punching down. He has like something to say about whatever like touchy subject he's touching on, but more so, like, he's really good at crowd work, and I was gonna ask you
if it's in the special, because a lot of the videos that I've watched on YouTube are actually not him necessarily telling scripted jokes, but are purely crowd work, and I enjoy watching it. I do think that he can be particularly misogynistic at times. He likes to talk about women's bodies and him having sex with random women a lot in ways that can be a little unsavory. But I think he navigates those choppy waters well, because he does kind of have this like impish jester quality to him that makes it a little more palatable to laugh along with. Like, it's not like he's not making fun of women. He is, like you said, kind of crude and base, and that points in all directions.
yeah, for sure. And yes, he definitely does some crowd work on the on his special. The bit that he has like a knack for like making people just admit really embarrassing shit.
Yes, he does.
And the one that he that stands out from the special is he has his closing bit is about like the couple times like he had some disastrous threesomes, and he asks the crowd first, like, anybody had a threesome? And he gets like two people who did not have good experiences to kind of. And I was watching like, bro, you're sharing this? All right, go ahead, man. But like,
give him the stage.
But he does really good like crowd work with these like people that he convinces to like, what's your threesome? Hey, what's your threesome story? You got anything embarrassing?
That's true. I think there's something really interesting there where it's like, I mean, there are a lot of like literary critics that have written about basically since the 1970s, especially, though it predates that a little, of like the confessional mode of writing, right? And poetry and novels. of don't put the
I just
water
put my
on the
drink
mixer.
on her mixer that we just got.
That there became this very like individuated form of writing that is about exposing yourself, your traumas, what's going on internally. And the thing that's like super interesting, like a very early example of this would be like Sylvia Plath, right? But in the poetry space. But I think what's really interesting about what you just said and why I'm bringing this up, or what it pulled out for me, is like he is pushing that in a different direction, where it's like eliciting, it's a form of art that is eliciting other people to be confessional. Not simply just like it revolving around self-confession.
And it's weirdly sweet in a way that I can't quite put my finger on, but like it feels communal. Like he's like getting people, like his crowd work like gets people to admit like pretty embarrassing shit, and he's kind of like his attitude is always like, hey, we're in it together, buddy. You're in it.
Right. I was gonna say we're in it together. It's kind of like a little bit of a sweeter version of what we talked about 2 episodes again now in the Gran Torino episode, where this masculinity that Clint Eastwood endorses and performs is like, again, very jocular. It's like rough and teasing, but it's like crude and mean.
No actual humor to it.
Yeah.
Just like,
But also just like the spirit of it is like, I'm beating you down. Like I'm beating you down and you're going to beat me down. And we're engaged in this ritual of beating each other down. And instead it's like, there's something like about Stav's crowd work that's like, let's hold hands to talk about fucked up shit we've done and that have happened to us, you know?
And Stavros' like depiction of masculinity, I think, is usually pretty like refreshing and interesting. Like, you know, he's an odd looking gentleman. He's just, you know, short, round. He, I think at this point, is growing a haircut that he knows is ridiculous looking. But he's like got this like just kind of confidence, and like whenever he talks about masculinity, it's just I don't know, it's just very refreshing, I guess, especially in like the stand-up comedy space, where like most men talking about masculinity and stand-up comedy is like you want to die the entire time you're listening to them.
And I would say, like, I would love for a fat woman to be able to occupy a similar role. But that said, that doesn't that would be an add-on to me. It does not operate in exclusion of me thinking that most of the things that Stav says that I have seen, thus can be personally accountable for, are funny.
Yeah. What about you? What have you been watching lately?
So I have recently been listening to a new audiobook that is called Ringmaster, Vince McMahon and the Unmaking of America, which is written by Josie Riesman. I highly, if you're interested in wrestling, I highly recommend following her on Twitter, because she tweets about politics and wrestling all the time. So it's a good intersection for me. I'm about a third of the way through it. So it has covered Vince McMahon's like childhood. And then what a
nightmare.
Oh, it is really, you should really.
I don't know anything about it, but I can only imagine based on the adult he became.
So, I mean, it's primarily that he did not have like a strong father figure for like much of his childhood, and that there was a lot of disruption. Like his parents were married multiple times. He was like raised by an overbearing stepfather, and like there's just a lot of there's not a lot of continuity to his childhood. But the most interesting thing about it so far is that it's really a tale about corporate consolidation and how WWE, if you care about wrestling at all, or frankly media and the development of cable in America, if you don't know, basically there used to be a lot of different wrestling companies called territories that had some, they were very regionally focused. And everybody kind of had their little fiefdom. Like they were like, there's, you know, I am the king of Nashville wrestling. I am the king of the Southeast. I am king of over here in California or whatever. And part of what Vince did that fundamentally transformed wrestling was eat up those territories, nab workers, wrestlers from underneath them, and then even like nabbing wrestling spot or airing slots like on television channels from territories until like everyone had no option but to kowtow to him. So I look forward to continue listening to it, but if you're interested in, again, kind of the overlapping circles of wrestling, politics, media, landscape shifting in the late 20th century, I highly recommend it.
Hell yeah. I just bought a wrestling book that I
which one?
It's Mankind's autobiography.
Hell yeah. Mick Foley is one of my
favorite
favorite wrestlers of all time. One of our dogs is named Cactus Jack. After one of the other three faces.
I haven't really read. I read the like little foreword that he wrote just because I got it at like a used bookstore and then just came home and was like, let me read the little beginning. But I haven't dove into it yet, but I'm excited.
He's also a good man.
A good dude.
Of that era of wrestler, there's a lot of wife beaters, general hooligans, people who, and I want to say I'm not including this in the same category, right? There's people who are abusive, and then also there's a lot of like substance abuse and people faltering health because of the sometimes necessary decision to use substances to cope with the lack of health insurance coverage, for example. But Mick Foley is like a good dude who's remained family centered and has really has done work around like domestic violence and rape crisis centers, doing a lot of fundraising. Like, I like him a lot. He's a good dude, and I love hardcore wrestling. I like when people bleed.
Hell yeah. And there's a couple good dudes from that era. I feel like, is the Undertaker a good guy? Is he not?
I can't tell if you're being serious. Are you seriously asking that question?
I do not know about his personal life.
No, he's like a Blue Lives Matter.
Oh shit! Yeah. For real?
Oh yes.
What about Stone Cold?
Stone Cold has like so I'll say like Stone Cold is one of my favorite wrestler, right? Stone Cold Steve Austin, the character, is one of my favorite wrestlers also of all time. He does have like previous DV charges. I believe he was never convicted, though obviously that's not always a metric of whether or not someone is good. My understanding is like there's a lot of mellowing out that he's done in older age, but I would consider myself a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan. I would not consider myself a Steve Austin fan.
Have you seen that video of the kid getting off the bus on the last day of school? It's like a kid that is like a wrestling fan, and he gets off the bus doing like he's like 8, but he's doing a pitch perfect Stone Cold impression about how it's the last day of school. He's like, "Oh yeah, brother." Or, that wasn't Stone Cold. That was Hulk Hogan. My bad. But
it was a little crossfaded, you know.
At the end, he smashes 2 little milk cartons together.
Amazing.
And he does the little. It's really good. It's really cute.
Yeah, I mean, Stone Cold's character of working class, blue collar, fuck the man, and the man is Vince McMahon. That I get down for, has the greatest single entrance music of all time. The actual music itself is fine, but that glass breaking is legendary. You hear that sound and you just fucking know what is up. Also, like, hell yeah. I mean, Stone Cold said so, baby.
I also like that the Austin 316 came from making fun of Jake the Snake for finding Jesus, which is the promo. Does it have a name? I feel like it's legendary at this point, but the one where he's like, did I get the story right? That he's essentially like Jake the Snake really did find Jesus, but then they also put that into like his character in the WWE, and the whole Austin 316 is like, he is just making fun of Jake. John 3:16 says this. Well, Austin 3:16 says I'm gonna whip that ass or whatever. Yeah, which is awesome. Yeah,
I am very partial. Like, the things I care most about in wrestling, number one is a whoop ass promo. Like, just the ability to tear on the mic, and then the number 2 thing is fluid wrestling, like wrestling that feels like it's gliding. And now, I mean, with all of both his knees whacked to fuck, obviously that is no longer true of Steve Austin, but like a Stone Cold Stunner is a well-executed Stone Cold Stunner is.
I love it. Are you going to watch Money in the Bank next week? Or when this comes out, it would have been a couple weeks ago, but
maybe. We'll see. Like I said, I don't watch very much WWE anymore. I mean, it's one of those things that the pay-per-view, since we have Peacock, like sometimes we'll just put them on while doing other things. I will say there was an amazing, at this point it will have been like a month ago, a killer pay-per-view that AEW did called Forbidden Door, which is a joint project between AEW and New Japan. And there were some really stunning matches in that, including a 4-way that included Zack Sabre Jr. and Orange Cassidy, just being so slick, like sliding off of each other, doing batshit moves and doing really intricate submission wrestling that is, again, just some of my favorite shit. So lots of good wrestling available to watch.
I'm also
in the past and coming up.
That just last night, and I'm just realizing, putting this all together, but like I was really an upset sleep last night, just not tossing and turning, weird dreams and all that. And then I realized when I woke up in the morning that I fell asleep listening to a podcast about Chris Benoit. And I was like, oh, well, that explains that. So.
What podcast?
It's actually not a podcast. I realized I said that. It's a YouTube channel.
Okay.
I shout out, I guess. I don't know. Its channel's called Dreading. It's just this guy. It's just like, there's a shitload of like true crime YouTube channels now, and they're usually terrible. I feel like this guy, first off, it's not his face. Like, he just does voiceover where he and he really dives deep into it. So I was like getting the deep detail. My subconscious while I was sleeping was getting deep Chris Benoit details, and I got a weird night's sleep last night.
There was a wrestler. So the pay-per-view was in Canada, Forbidden Door, and there was a wrestler that did Chris Benoit's finish.
Yeah.
Intentionally to get heat, and it was.
Oh, he was
spicy. People were.
Yeah.
Some people, some marks were mad about it, but I thought it was.
Yeah, I mean,
it's fair game. It's a move, Have you watched last detour on wrestling? I promise listeners that don't care about wrestling. Have you watched Dark Side of the Ring? That's Vice,
and it's like individual episodes, right? Like,
correct.
I've seen the here and there of Dark Side of the Ring. Okay. I've probably seen. Is there one on Chris Benoit? I've probably seen
they did one last season. Yeah. It's it's worth watching if you are interested in kind of the underbelly and seeing the backstage. But also I find that as someone that didn't watch wrestling growing up, or didn't watch it prior to being like probably I started somewhere between 23 and 25, who didn't really watch it before then, or did not watch it affirmatively at all before then, it's helpful to just like provide the context. It gives you some background, and if you get into that and like it at all, I highly recommend watching Tales from the Territories, which is they do these like round tables about Dark Side of the Ring is the seedy underbelly, right? Tales from the Territories, I mean, a lot of it is seedy, but that's not what they're striving for. They're not like uncovering in a true crime way. Sure, yeah. It's just story, interesting, funny, weird
anecdotes
from the territorial that I was just describing, Age of Wrestling. Some of those episodes are like on YouTube. Like, you don't have to have access to Vice TV to watch them. And those are fun because part of the reason why they do roundtables is because these dudes don't tell the truth. These old wrestlers that are still, or promoters or whatever, that are still invested in kayfabe, will just like tell different versions of the story, and that kind of becomes the picture. The picture forms as a mosaic across those various ideas.
Hell yeah. Well, going on to current events, what's happening in the world this week that's either got you celebrating or in despair?
So we'll keep it pretty brief here, but on June 26th, so a couple weeks ago, Daniel Boguslaw, who is a journalist with The Intercept, put out some reporting about Martha Ann Baumgardner Alito having a gas and oil lease with Citizen Energy 3, which is an energy and gas company. He notes that environmentalist activists are really concerned about this in light of this year's decision concerning the Clean Water Act and last year in 2022's decision concerning the Clean Air Act, where Alito basically said like the United States can't regulate the emissions of factories.
Justice Alito, right?
Yes, Justice Alito.
Yeah, not the wife.
Said that in the Clean Air Act related decision that the United States like can't regulate the emissions of factories in some form, and the Clean Water Act decision from May of this year related to like what land is eligible to be regulated under it, and basically the idea that he's putting forth and that kind of environmental activists were definitely putting forth is that there's no direct conflict of interest here once very strictly defined, right? Like Citizen Energy 3 is not party to either of those cases, or they weren't party to either of those cases, but it's more a lesson in how these problems, namely conflict of interest, are endemic to class position and thus endemic to the institution of the Supreme Court, that preferences, beliefs, orientations, and biases are shaped by people's material interests, and that those subsequently affect what kinds of decisions they make, especially if they're in positions of power that can help perpetuate those interests and those same positions of power. So it's just, Alito continues to be a little bitch, basically.
And on the heels of the Clarence Thomas shit, where we know he's bought and paid for by a billionaire. So,
right.
So it's
really
bleak.
Sparkling, clean, unimpeachable work by our Supreme Court.
Man, we love them. We love all of our justices.
How about you?
Mine's gonna be a real bummer.
Oh, cool.
And I'm gonna cheat a little bit because this is also a movie that I watched. But I'm gonna finagle it into our current event section. But it has to deal with Florida's DCF, the Department of Children and Families, which is at this point fairly notorious for a number of really like disastrous fuck ups. There's been stories about foster families like repeatedly sexually abusing children in the recent years. Recently in Miami, a series of siblings who were, a child who was dead, had been dead, DCF had reports showing that they did welfare checks on them. DCF in Florida is just a bit of a mess in general. But I watched a movie called Take Care of Maya. Have you seen this?
I have not.
Okay. There's not really a way for me to talk about this without spoiling it. I know you don't mind. I know we've talked about spoilers in general. But if you don't want this documentary spoiled, then fast forward a few minutes. Also, let me just give a quick trigger warning for talk of suicide very briefly coming up. But if that's just not something that you want to hear right now, please skip ahead as well. But this documentary called Take Care of Maya is about this family, the Kowalskis, by coincidence, which is also the name of Clint Eastwood's character in Gran Torino, the movie that we did a couple weeks ago. But it focuses on this family, the Kowalskis, and their 10-year-old daughter Maya, who as a 10-year-old started experiencing like these pains that were like these very acute pains that were just crippling, and she went to a bunch of doctors and nobody could figure out, and then finally this doctor diagnosed her with CRPS, something called chronic regional pain syndrome, which is this rare disease that's still not quite well understood, but essentially your body's nervous system is giving a disproportionate pain response. So whereas you or I might get a muscle strain or any whatever sort of issue with our bodies, after a little bit the pain goes away, the pain response is no longer needed. People who have CRPS, the pain response is disproportionate, so you're having weeks-long pain responses to things that would have cleared up in a day or two to anyone else. So it's this like really not well understood disease. So she goes to this doctor who essentially gets her on ketamine treatments, which are like help with nerve disorders like this. So she's on these ketamine treatments, and she has a flare-up where she's in extreme pain, and her parents take her to the hospital. And while at the hospital, they're asking her questions, and the hospital asks her about her medication, and the parents say she's on these ketamine treatments, and the doctors at the hospital basically, kind of saying, oh, ketamine treatments, that's weird. They report her to DCF, saying that the parents are abusing her, and without doing any due diligence, DCF came in and basically made the determination that that she was suffering from Munchausen by proxy. She was the target, and the mom was intentionally giving her ketamine to make her sick. Even with the doctor on the other, like the doctor who prescribed her, like calling DCF day in and day out saying, no, I prescribed this treatment to her. Long story short, this girl was taken away from her parents, for this 10-year-old, for 3.5 months. She was not allowed to see her mom at all. She could only see like 1-hour visitations with her dad. And ultimately the mom, who was like her primary caretaker, committed suicide because there was a pending, there was the looming prospect of like criminal charges and all these things, and the mom ended up hanging herself in the family garage, and then the girl was released like a couple days after that, all that happened. And it's a really just like devastating documentary, just kind of about, the mismanagement of like how things like this slide through the cracks and then no one really checks. And it's a really upsetting documentary, but a really interesting, good one as well.
Yeah, I think that not having seen this, but knowing some about the circumstances in Florida and generally kind of research and reporting on DCF failures in other states, I think it's a fraught conversation because accountability is necessary, and we have to protect children from real and present danger, especially from caregivers. Yeah. But also, as you've talked about in this story, and as is like, again, kind of reported widely, like DCF often function as like an extension of cops, and all the problems that are embedded in policing are also embedded in DCF. So the overreach here, the lack of orientation towards family restoration, the like allegations without substantiation, the fact that we know this is like disproportionately affects like black mothers more than it does white mothers. These are all things that like have to be rectified and purged out as part of that accountability process.
And that is kind of like a big part of the movie is kind of talking about like how the system is like working in theory, but then like falls apart because the people who originally reported it were the nurses who saw like these high level ketamine doses and were like, that seems unnatural. And I don't think that there should be any ill will held towards them, that they had a suspicion this doesn't seem right and they reported it. The issue is that basically the final decision came down to this one fairly like stubborn doctor at the hospital who was just like refusing, and DCF's entire decision tree from then on out stemmed from this one person who was just being obstinate in the face of like this family going like, no, we can show you what is happening here. And like this entire like domino effect happened because of this like decision got hung up by this one person who clearly didn't understand what they were dealing with. It's really sad, but a really good documentary.
And you said it's on Netflix if people are interested?
It is on Netflix, I believe. Yes. Yeah. Take Care of Maya is the name. Maya's the girl at the center of the film. I completely lost where we were at. I was about to say, what about you? What's been going on that's got you going? And I was like, nope, we're moving on. So before we get to the movie proper, let's first do just a little promo here. And let me first, before a promo, geez, look at me, the hubris. Thank you first for listening to the Red Rose Film Club. And if you'd like to be an absolute doll, please consider liking, sharing, telling a friend about the podcast. Leave a comment, tweet at us. We love hearing from you all. And also, we, in addition to the podcast, we also do some in-person screenings here in Tallahassee at Cap City Video Lounge, the oft-mentioned Cap City Video Lounge. We have a few coming up on July 7th. We are watching Platoon.
I took that out because when the time this comes out, that will have already happened.
That's right. So on July 7th, we watched Platoon. And on August 4th, we're going to watch Battle Royale.
Woo!
On Friday, September 1st, it's Black Klansman. And on October the 6th, we'll be watching The People Under the Stairs for Halloween season.
Ooh, so yeah.
Are we ready to move on to our main event?
It's time for the main event.
Yeah, we watched The Mule, the 2018 Clint Eastwood movie, and I think we're going to have some fun with this one. The Mule is kind of a spiritual sequel to Gran Torino in the sense that it's kind of about an elderly white American who represents this romanticized version of American masculinity, who is isolated himself from his family and must learn a lesson from an unlikely source, which in both movies is just non-white people that need to teach like an old man how to be a better
human
guy, I guess. Yeah. But The Mule is like a curious movie because I do think it is Clint Eastwood's like most left-leaning film, even if that wasn't necessarily his intentions. In The Mule, Clint Eastwood plays an old Clint Eastwood, even looking from Gran Torino to this, just a scant 10 years.
Decrepit, a scarecrow of a man. Crepe paper skin, like he's a little shambling pinata.
Jesus. There's a few where he just looks like, buddy, somebody.
It's crazy.
Call the authorities.
This was 5 years ago. Theoretically 6. I don't know exactly when it was filmed.
What does he look like now?
Right.
And who's seen him lately?
I know. God. My thought was like, this is his last movie, right? While watching it.
Did you check?
No, I didn't check, but I mean, it has to be.
I think he did a baseball one. Or did he direct that?
Here, why don't I can investigate while you
yeah, definitely
can continue the description of the movie.
Yeah, so in The Mule, he plays a 90-year-old horticulturist who gets recruited by
What'd you call me? Sorry.
by the Mexican cartel to mule drugs from point A to point B in his trusty pickup. This is a man approaching senility. He is at this point in the movie like 70% infirmed. His business has shuttered, his horticulture business. He has no source of income and thus takes on an unlikely partnership with big players in the drug game. And we are thus painting a picture of someone who gets involved in illicit activities, not because they're a bad person, but because their material conditions have deteriorated in such a way that they have no other option. Hal, what about you? Am I being too generous calling this accidentally leftist? What was your overall assessment?
Okay. Before I answer the question, I'm a dumbass. Richard Jewell came out the year after this.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a movie that is listed as TVA Juror Number 2. It's a thriller where a juror serving on a murder trial realizes he's at fault for the victim's death, starring Nicholas Hoult, Toni Collette, Zoe Deutsch, Kiefer Sutherland.
Hell yeah. I'm actually there for that one.
And production began this month. So apparently we're going to have... Oh, and Cry Macho. So I was so wrong. Somehow, again, this
guy's working.
Crepe paper pinata of a man, or crepe paper skin pinata of a man, has continued to make movies, which is wild. Now, my opinion on this film, I liked it more than I thought I would.
Me too.
I will get into my details of the criticism of where the movie turned for me and where I stopped liking it.
The motorcycle scene.
No, that's a high point for me. That's a high point for me. I'll just say like the third act, it really loses steam for me.
For sure. Yeah.
Which I will talk about in depth later, but I didn't hate watching this movie. I would even say I enjoyed watching this movie, which is a sharp contrast from the previous two Clint Eastwood films we've watched. Enough so that just the juxtaposition makes me say this was a good movie.
Yeah.
if I didn't have the context of those other two movies, I don't know what my read on this would be.
Sure.
But it probably would be weakened. But on the whole, I actually could see myself watching this movie again.
Oh, there's parts for sure. Like
that. So I would say, that speaks on some level to its strength. I don't know if it's accidentally leftist, but I do think it is like when conservatives approach understanding the working class on a very superficial level without understanding like the systematic underpinnings of what has produced that situation. I do think it's doing that, which in some way is kind of classic liberalism.
Sure.
And there are ways in which both conservatives and like big L liberals in the United States are classically liberal, and there are ways in which
like
people
Dave
in
Rubin.
both those categories are not. I can't with you. So I think in some ways this movie is like more classically liberal than the other two movies of his that we watched.
It's definitely not as self-serious as the other two, which I think is a big benefit.
It is funnier.
And something I was not expecting. I was definitely expecting more like Gran Torino, like there's not as much growling.
Yes, I agree.
There's definitely more confused stares in this one of just an old man. God, he's old. Like
I know. It really is like one of the things you walk
in
away
some parts where
with.
Like, man,
God
he
damn.
is old.
I hope that I can not be working at
For
that
real.
age.
I mean,
if
I
I'm
hope he's
alive at
enjoying
that
it at
age.
least. He must be.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
He seems like his biography is. I'll say this. He seems like, obviously not knowing him personally or intimately, but just reading about like kind of he has like quite a few children by a lot of different women. He's been married a couple of times. He really seems like maybe some of those narratives around the deadbeat dad might be coming from personal
real place.
experience. Maybe, allegedly. I don't know. So
we touched on that a little bit in the last one too, where to me it felt like that the Scott scene in the last one was really like him like, hey, I'm gonna tell you something without telling you something by putting you in this movie. Whereas, and this one too seems like you are exercising some demons.
Right.
Here.
Very much it comes off as exercising some demons. But I also think that the flip side of that is that some of what he's doing is a little more fun here. And so the movie doesn't feel so like a tight little shitty puzzle that was created for the easiest person to solve. Like there's just like a little more going on. It's a little breathy, like there's more breathing room in it for me.
I also think it works slightly better than Gran Torino because like he has like an actual change that has to happen, whereas like in Gran Torino, like he's kind of the same guy by the end of the movie. Like he's become slightly more tolerant. He doesn't really learn anything. Like I don't know. In Gran Torino, it's like I don't feel like he likes Asians by the end. He just likes the one Asian. Yeah. And in this one, in the Mule, I feel like he's actually made like some sort of like there's been a character arc where there's like some change and some development or whatever.
Yeah, I do think there is. Obviously, we see a change in behavior, like you intimated in Gran Torino. I think what's happening there is like Gran Torino is him saying, like, I can change what is hurting me. And open the door for like new behavior and new social connections. And in this movie, there actually is some like reflection on other people and how he's impacting
for sure.
them. So talked about kind of our general perspectives on this. What do you think about the writing in this movie?
It is a little lame. There's like a lot of like there are a lot of like plot developments that happen just as a matter of convenience. The craziest one being okay, so I don't know if we touched on this, but so his character in this, Earl Stone, is this guy who he's 90 years old in the movie, and he's a horticulturist, and he has really pushed his family aside for his horticulture business. And just like, you know, we get the idea that he's been hoeing about a bit.
I was going to say, hoeing about, drinking about. It seems like his friends through the Daylily community, which is specifically what he grows, and the VFW and some of these other spaces are things that he has invested much more time, energy, fucking, etc.
than his family. And so like the movie introduces the dynamic with him and his family as being like him kind of on the outs. Like we see like an early scene where he doesn't show up to his daughter's wedding, which then I guess we're meant to believe is kind of causes this years long rift that when the movie picks up in the present time, she's still got this animosity towards him. Her and her now adult daughter, his granddaughter, played by Taysa Farmiga.
Yeah.
And so the catalyst of the movie is he goes to a birthday party where
it's the
baby
it's
the wedding
pre-wedding
wedding some sort of
the
celebration.
Granddaughter is getting married,
right? And they get in this big like blowout fight. The family members like how he was never around for him, and then the most implausible thing in the world happens where a dude just runs up and is like, "Hey, you want to drive for the cartel? I heard you saying you like your truck." And I was like, what the fuck? Like, this guy just heard at this birthday party this old man be like, I like a truck. And he's like,
I know.
You want to drive for the cartel? I was like, hold on.
That they couldn't, like, smooth that out at
also,
all.
Also, what cartel would not just execute that dude on the spot when they're like, I found a 90-year-old man to drive your drugs for you?
Well,
and
you know, it's based on a true story.
Are you really telling me this? Is this really based on a true story?
Yes, there's a New York Times article about an 87-year-old man who, like, obviously the finer details are all fabricated, but like, yes, there was an 87-year-old white man that was arrested.
At a wedding shower?
I don't know. I agree. That is silly.
There's just like moments of convenience in the plot where like they're just like, how are we gonna get there? I don't know, just have a dude run up to him and be like, I heard what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, that you like driving and that like your business got foreclosed upon,
right,
and your house got foreclosed upon. Seems like you're desperate and you are a safe driver. Because when he says it, he's like, you've never had a ticket? And he's like, I've never had a ticket.
Okay, that was really cute. Because he says it, he's like, never had a ticket, not even one. Like he repeats it. Once. He like repeats it in like an old grandpa way where I was like, all right, that was cute. Yeah. I think that's also why I like this movie, because it does remind me of like old Southern relatives that I have that I'm like.
Clint is definitely being a little more charming. We see him actually be charming.
Hell yeah, big dick swinging at that flower conference.
At the Daylily conference.
Oh my god.
While he's skipping his daughter's wedding.
That was weird. I was like, really?
Yeah, because he's a big man on campus there.
But at that point, the Daylily contest had ended, and he was just like going out with the boys.
That's not odd to me. I'm not gonna fucking call out any specific family member of mine, but as someone that has not, I want to make it very clear, not my immediate family. Yeah. My dad is like the best dad in the universe. But hey, Dad.
Hey, do you know what a soy boy is? Yeah.
But he did text me about the soy boy comment. But you know, maybe have other family members a generation away from him that were very much deadbeat dads, investing time and energy elsewhere, always chasing the next buck, kind of jack of all trades, sowing your wild oats wherever you can kind of people. So that to me is very believable, that he would be like, I'm the big man on campus here at this Daylily conference. I don't fucking care about that. And he's like, substance use is added it. You know, he's drinking and he's boozing and having a good time, and women are giving him attention. I will say the other thing, which is not readily apparent from that scene, but comes up during the, spoiler alert for 20 minutes from now, the death scene with the grandma. Grandma Mary says during that scene, we had a good 10 years, or maybe he says to her, we had a good 10 years.
Yeah.
So in the 10 years? When was that 10 years? Is it 10 years that you were actually married, but you've been, like, obviously had entanglements because of your kids this whole time?
Or was the 10... Yeah.
Like, but your relationship was longer than that. You were simply married 10 years, but you dated for longer before that, which doesn't really make sense based on your ages. But, so that is also kind of the thing for me here is, like, I understand the daughter, like his daughter, being frustrated and hurt by him not showing up to her wedding. But the grandma is like holding a grudge when they were married for 10 years and he's literally 90.
Yeah.
Like that's bonkers.
It is. There are parts where like the animosity seems to be driven mostly by like plot convenience.
Oh yeah. The daughter's level of anger at him was a little baffling,
crazy at
to
times.
me.
Yeah,
like the scene with where the granddaughter is graduating cosmetology school, and he comes and sits down next to her. He doesn't even speak to her, and she gets up and totally moves. Again, don't have a relationship with him. Great. I fully encourage children to cut off their parents if they're, but nothing about this man has been depicted as abusive. And you can rebuke his efforts to reintegrate into your life, but you have to like stand up and like storm away in a front-facing theater while a graduation is happening. And like it's just really dramatic.
And it's a scene where like he is actively trying to make amends in a way that's not like self-centered. Like he comes in quietly, sits down, he's not making a scene, he's not trying to make a production that he showed up, and she's still like
it feels like there just has to be like this really aggressive, grand like negativity in their relationship, so that when the ultimate resolution comes, it feels particularly sweet. Which I think is like what's happening there.
Is an issue that I have with this one, and maybe my issue with the ending of Gran Torino is that like the revelations feel so like forced, that like we got to do that movie magic to make the moment when like the turn happens even more impactful. But so many moments in this one just come off like kind of weird, like the graduation moment. But yeah, so another thing that we talked about in Gran Torino is how minority groups fared in Clint Eastwood's depiction.
You're as an educator, you're releasing a report card, and he's just shitting on it down the line.
He does better in this one than the last one.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not dropping a like ethnic slur from the 1970s.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, Gran Torino was like one of those unreleased Bugs Bunny cartoons with the amount of like anti-Asian slurs just have flying. But this one like is a little bit better, but not great. First off, basically every Mexican in this is connected to the cartel. I don't think, other than the Michael Pena character, I don't think there is a single Mexican character who is not affiliated with the cartel.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, well, no, because even the people that we see at the pre-wedding brunch, there's like obviously the implication that they're connected.
Yeah, that's
in some
the
way,
guy that's
they're
like,
the connected
hey,
tissue.
I'm a Mexican at the wedding, and I know the cartel, and you should. Like, yeah, the one like Mexican guy at this party he's at is like, hey, I know the cartel. You want to work for him? It was just crazy. And then the scene that I really, really hate is the one where he helps the black family with the flat tire.
Woo!
And he uses the N-word, not the N-word, the Negro word.
Specifically 1950s
Yeah. And it's a thing that I hate because, like, again, like when we talked about Gran Torino, like I know dudes like that. I've grew up with dudes like that. And then the excuse is exactly the same all the time. It's always the vibe of like, oh, I didn't know I couldn't say that. And I was like, yes, you did, asshole. Like, you are 90 years old. This is not the first time somebody told you not to say that.
Yeah, and if it truly is brand new information to you, it's because you're so self-absorbed that you haven't paid attention to what anyone else around you has said ever in fucking 40 years minimum, and really 50, 60, 70 years. Yeah, I will say I do like the way the scene is written. I think that I was pleasantly surprised that the words that the writer put in the mouth of the black woman in the family that's being assisted in that scene was, you know, you can just say black people or people.
Yeah.
You know, like that. Again, not that no one deserves a fucking award for this. I'm not clapping. I'm just like, wow, in the context of the jingoism of American Sniper and the extreme racism of Gran Torino,
where no one says shit when he says slurs. It was like, oh, somebody actually is like, hey, you don't have to say
said so in a way that is like humanistic and real. Like I would believe that is the way someone who is facing racism by a man who is like attempting to help them would respond.
Sure. There's also one. I'm this is strictly conjecture, but there is an actor in the movie who is Filipino, and the character is Filipino. I guarantee goddamn to you that like Clint Eastwood just thought he was Mexican and then realized he was Filipino, and they had to like add a line because like literally they do not mention that he's Filipino throughout, and then there's one part where the guy's like, I'm not even Mexican. I'm Filipino. And that so felt to me like Clint Eastwood being like, oh, he's Filipino. Write it in.
A new
put
line.
a line in.
That actor is in The Good Place. He's like friends with Manny.
Jacinto?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, he's one of the like deadbeat DJs he hangs out with?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay.
So I was like, oh, hey.
Is he one of the ones that locks him in the that puts him in the locker? But one of the minority groups that we get to see Clint Eastwood interact with, which is one that I know you like, is
I am fist pumping, listener.
Clint Eastwood happens upon a motorcycle gang of just some rough, burly dudes doing some work on their bikes. And I don't remember what he says, but like he sees one of these guys working on their bikes, and he's like, "Hey, it's your."
Hey man, yeah, he's like, hey man, it's this is an Edgewood 1700. That's totally made up. I don't remember the name of the motorcycle.
Yeah, well, because it's a Clint Eastwood character, like he has to know how to fix a motorcycle. So he's like, hey, you gotta make sure you get the
something or other,
the tinkler on that thing or whatever. And then the big burly biker dude stands up, and it's not a biker dude. It's a biker.
And she says, we're dykes on bikes.
She says, we're dykes on bikes. And a few pleasantries are exchanged. And then as they're leaving,
as he's leaving, he says, I think they say like, thanks, old man, or something like that. And he says, you're welcome, dykes. And he just like continues to walk away.
In a very jolly way, which is very pleasant.
I immediately screenshotted it. Like I was like, play it back. And I had to play it back like 4 times because I kept catching his face in a blur. It was a very genuine laugh from me. Like a just fully like unreserved laugh.
Yeah, that was Eastwood just cutting loose. He's having fun now.
Yeah. It's totally like unnecessary, right? Like there's no.
Who's next? I did the Mexicans. I did the Asians.
The one Filipino
we
guy.
get? Yeah. He's oh god. But yeah, so another thing that I felt outlandish about this movie is that how many goddamn runs did it take him before he realized he was hauling drugs?
I think he
knew the whole time.
I think
he just
knew
didn't
the whole
want to admit
time.
it. Is that what we're supposed to think? Because when he does see that it is drugs for the first time, because I kind of thought that too. But when he does unzip the bag for the first time and realizes it's like bricks of coke, he's like, "Holy shit!" or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's more of a like acknowledging to yourself.
Yeah.
What it is, because I mean, I think it's actually one of the interesting things about the movie is that Clint Eastwood, I think in his other films that we've watched, either for himself or the main character like Chris Kyle in American Sniper, is very interested in maintaining like the heroic veneer of those characters, even when he shows them doing bad or dumb or evil things. It's still ultimately like this is the exception that proves the rule,
right?
And I think the thing that's very interesting about the Mule is like this guy, the reasons for his behavior are shown, like you mentioned, kind of that there's a sliver of hope that there's maybe an understanding of what working people face in America and how poverty operates. But he is doing bad things, and I think he knows that he's doing bad things, and he's doing bad things to his family. He's doing bad things in terms of like you said, hauling around, which again I don't think is a bad thing, but in the context of this movie, definitely is. And he's hauling drugs for a cartel.
Yes, he is.
So I think he knows.
Okay. Yeah, it was just like, because the first few times it is kind of played for a laugh when he like meets the cartel guys. He's like, oh, what are you fellas up to? Like where he's clearly clueless, but they carry that on so long. I was like, are they still trying to act like he doesn't know what he's doing here? I
don't think that he's being clueless there. I think that is a way of maintaining his internal fiction,
the, like,
and also
of
him being like maintaining distance, like keeping them at an arm's length. But then once because ultimately he is like a charismatic guy who warms up and wants to be congenial with people. That once those walls are down, he's like, okay, I don't have to like pretend anymore that I don't know what's going on here. But then also the illusion is kind of shattered if you go and actually look at at the coke or heroin or whatever it is.
And he crosses paths, I guess, with there's 2 DEA agents who are like investigating this cartel, played by Bradley Cooper, in a really boring role. That there's just nothing going on for that.
Why
for that guy.
Does fucking? I understand there's maybe a little constraint in that Chris Kyle is a real person, but how is it that Bradley Cooper is like a very hot man and Clint Eastwood is like, I'm gonna make this man as
like
white bread dork.
Yeah.
Oogly as possible.
Yeah, he is very dorky in this one too. He's like
really bad haircuts in both movies.
Yeah, real bad, and just nothing going. He's just boring in this movie. He does nothing to do, and even more so is his partner is Michael Pena, who's like a dude I like in movies. He's like usually a fun presence, an interesting presence, but he does have like a history of being like the best part in really shitty movies. Like,
well, and he loves to and what I'm about to say, well, let me say it first. He loves to play a cop. I say that saying I do imagine that there's probably a dynamic for Latino actors in Hollywood where like there's kind of a coin flip where it's like, do you want to play like a denigrating criminal or do you want to play the agent of the state? So I'm not saying like he's the worst person in the world for that, but motherfucker loves to play.
I'm trying to think what else. That End of Watch movie.
End of Watch. He's in the End of Watch is the one with Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah, that's what I was. That is the other movie that I was.
But you're right.
He's
definitely
of,
been like a cop type in like a lot of stuff. I remember him being really good in a terrible movie, which is Crash.
Oh God!
Where he has like a really like emotionally manipulative scene in what it's like trying to do for the movie, but he is really good in it. Where he has to like be very protective of his daughter.
I just learned from. I mean, it's Wikipedia, so you know, who knows? But he's a Scientologist.
Michael Pena? Yeah. Hell yeah!
What the fuck?
That's cool.
Yes, there's a 2016 The Guardian article entitled "Scientology Made Me a Better Actor." You know what? I'm gonna save that for.
You know what? I'm gonna give Scientology this one.
Day.
I bet that's true. I bet it did make him a better actor. I don't know how, but I'm willing to believe. Yeah, because
it's like essentially using cognitive behavioral therapy to deeply perverse repressive ends is like, and you pay them a lot of money. Like that's basically what Scientology is.
You're convincing me. I'm gonna join.
Okay, in Babel he played a border control agent.
Okay.
So
I remember him. Oh, okay. He not quite a cop, but he is in Observe and Report as one of the mall cops. So that's pretty close.
I'm telling you,
that is like basically a parody of like cop movies. So that counts.
In Battle Los Angeles, he's in the military. Like he's got quite a few that he's
also now like currently Marvel's like comic relief in a lot of them. He's in the Ant-Man movies, and I think he's popped up like here or there because they're like, we gotta put something in this, and he's bring Michael Pena in to do a sketch in the middle of this movie. I do like him in the Ant-Man movies, but I really don't like those Ant-Man movies at all.
No, they're some of the only. I used to be very in on MCU stuff, including I also like I read comics, all of that, and they lost me many years ago at this point in time. Yeah. But the Ant-Man movies are the movies that I have continued to watch.
I don't think I've seen any of them other than the first time that I saw them. So maybe I should revisit. Wait, how many are there?
There's 3.
Okay, I haven't seen the
There's
third
Ant-Man,
one just came out.
Ant-Man and Wasp, and then Quantumania, which just came out within the last couple of months. It's like fine. I don't think it's great. I think the thing for me is like with stuff like the MCU, setting aside all the conversations that can be had about its negative impact on film production and like the film industry and all of that stuff, but just purely as like a watching it perspective, I don't need. I think of my media consumption as having like slots that can be filled,
Sure.
right? Like in the way that you might have like weapon slots in a video game or D&D and something, right? And like I just only have so many fucking superhero slots, and I really have like one. Yeah. So at any given time in a year, I only want to watch like one of those movies, and I just don't care about the really broad sweeping stuff. Oddly, as someone that loves sci-fi movies and aliens, the bigger and broader scope that the MCU gets, the less I like it. Like, me
too. Yeah.
I like just when they're like trying to do galaxy size stuff, I just don't give a fuck about it. Now, Quantumanium, like they are obviously they go to like the quantum realm and stuff, but it's not. It doesn't have all these connections that are
it's not
much
like setting
broader.
Up something that'll pay off in 5 years.
I mean, it did well, especially now that fucking Jonathan Majors, who knows what's going on with him playing Kang, because that's what it was setting up, is him being Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah.
But I like that. I like the Spider-Man movies for similar reasons. You know, they're not as big broad, but I don't need to watch another Avengers movie.
Yeah. And you got to save your superhero slot for The Flash.
Absolutely not.
I
know you're joking. I know you're joking,
like shit, but
I already didn't want to see it because of Ezra Miller's like batshit felonious ass.
God, DC and now Marvel have both put like all their eggs in the baskets of two dudes who are like
Ezra Miller's not a dude, but yes.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They use they them pronouns.
Okay.
They fucking suck. But yes, they both have.
Didn't they like pass out naked in somebody's like house?
There's
or
like
something?
a lot of weird. They were like accused of like essentially like holding a woman and her children captive. I mean, there's like, it seems like there is some substance use intersecting with some mental health issues, and there's like paranoia and other maybe schizoaffective expressions or things like that, but absolutely not. I don't want to see that movie because of them. And then also when I saw the trailers, and it's like they're bringing back Michael Keaton, and I was like, you made Birdman, dude. You cannot come back. You can't come back for that. Like, you can't come back for that. So sorry for this very winding digression.
Oh my god! Put Clint Eastwood in that Batman costume if you're gonna do that.
Okay.
That would be dope.
I would watch that movie.
I would too.
I'm willing to use my one superhero movie slot.
I'm trying to think what slurs he'd have for like Gothamites.
I just like that if he portrayed Batman, the simulacrum folding in on itself of like, you know, Christian Bale kind of doing a Clint Eastwood kind of doing a Christian Bale, and then like him.
It's just a mute performance. It goes so full circle that he just doesn't speak.
A bat centipede, if you will.
Mashup. There's one thing about the Mule that I need to talk about, which is this movie's too horny in like gross ways. I did not need a 90-year-old Clint Eastwood sex scene, but we got half a one.
I think it is part of what makes this movie work, because it doesn't well, I don't think it's sexy at all, and I don't think the movie thinks it's sexy. I mean, the women have their tits out and stuff. I will say, I literally, when that woman took off her shirt, I literally screamed in my house, this movie has tits.
I know. I was kind of the same way, because his tits were out too.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, my wife and I were arguing about this because she was watching it, and I was like, that was gross. I did not need to see a Clint Eastwood sex scene. And she's like, that wasn't a sex scene. And I was like, her titties were out and his titties were out. That is all it needs for it to be a sex scene in
I
this
agree
movie.
with Jess. I don't think the movie conceives of that as a sex scene. Now, I will say before that, there is classic disembodied women's asses where like it's just it's just zoomed
floating
in on
from
butts.
ass to ass at the pool scene or whatever. Yeah.
And that is very classic. Again, like part of the disembodiment is like, I mean like on a much deeper level, right? Like a dehumanization of women, like where you're disconnecting the bodies of women, you're objectifying the bodies of women separate from their like agency, their faces, whatever. That, sure, the movie is just sprinkling in some spice. I think the double tits out, really triple tits out, because there's two women with their shirts off, and there's him, is not supposed to be sexy. I really don't think it is.
Not. Also, his go-to move, which was just like flopping backwards on the bed, was also exactly what Rudy Giuliani does in the Borat movie when they like trick him into almost sexually assaulting a woman he thought was 15. I think just old dudes at that point, like once you hit 80, you're just like, I can't do nothing but flop on the bed.
That's what I mean. I don't think it's intended. Here's what I'll say: it's not intended to be erotic.
Oh, well, I should hope not.
I think it truly is like continuing the thread of like he is indulgent and lives for other people to service,
I guess.
him.
But at that point, like, I don't know. Well, now I'm switching back because I was about to be like, you're 90, like, indulge away, baby. But at the same time, I'm like, no, I don't want to. Don't put any more of that on film. I don't want to see Clint Eastwood do any more sex scenes.
Yeah, ugh. I think that he is aware.
Yeah, it was
of
cheeky.
What the situation
is. Yeah, it was
is.
definitely like a cheeky moment.
Yeah, because he's also like, he's not saying sexy things, right? He's like, I don't remember exactly.
I think he makes
what
a
he
noise
says
at one
there.
point. He's like, oh.
Yeah, he's like making a noise, or he says like, oh, you took off your shirt, or something.
Would you look at that?
Yeah, it's just like kind of daffy. Yeah, it's just like a little daffy.
Yeah.
But
he does
I
that
agree.
really well in this movie of just being kind of like.
It's a little charming. I have to say.
It does. Actually, that is what Gran Torino's missing a little bit. Is if like. He was
just
a little
an
bit
asshole.
more self-aware of his assholiness. It might have made it a better movie. But yeah, there is another scene that like I was like, God, you're so close, but I don't know if the movie was was actually like picking up on the like racism. But it's the scene where, so like Bradley Cooper and Michael Pena have word that the Mule is driving a black pickup truck. So they're like searching the highway for a black pickup truck, and they pull up next to a black pickup truck that has two like 20-something college age white boys in it, and they're like and Bradley Cooper's like, no, look at them, they're just like little party animals or whatever. And then the next black pickup truck is a Mexican dude, and he's like, pull him over. And it's just a dude who's like scared out of his mind. He's not involved in this at all. And I was like, God damn, you were so close to getting like the point of like, I don't know. Do you think that was intentional?
I do, because we also see a scene later, and what I wrote in my note is, oh my God, Eastwood uses white privilege to help a cartel, where the scene with the cop coming and harassing the two dudes that are like the handlers of Eastwood.
Yeah. Oh,
during one of the runs, and he old man dawdles and kind of like interrupts them and diffuses the situation. So I think what I think is that the Nick Schneck, who wrote both this and
Schnecky.
Gran Torino, probably read a couple books between 2008 and 2018, in that approximate 10-year span of time. Also, maybe some reflection on the media landscape and going like, I don't want to be canceled.
Hell yeah. See, this was his intolerance. Like D.W. Griffith made Birth of a Nation. And I was like, I made Intolerance afterwards.
And similarly, like, oh, what the fuck? Not quite, man, but maybe
like,
a little. Like,
you're trying, I guess.
There's enough growth to not slap him across the face, right?
Did Woodrow Wilson watch this one at the White House? Was it Woodrow Wilson that showed Birth of a Nation at the White House? Yeah.
But not enough to not consider slapping him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
this movie's also got a crazy cast. Like,
it does.
And a few of them, like Lawrence Fishburne is in this movie for 30 seconds. I wanted more of Lawrence Fishburne scenes. But in addition to Bradley Cooper and Michael Pena, there's Lawrence Fishburne. Andy Garcia is in it, and I like Andy Garcia, but if you can put Andy Garcia as a cartel boss, I want to see him chewing more scenery. Like, I wanted more like unhinged wild rants and like just an opportunity, and then the way he dies is like pretty unceremonious.
That's my thing. Is that's one of the points of the movie where it started to turn for me, where my perspective on it turned, because I forget the actor that plays the guy that's leading the mutiny, but he's in a bunch of fucking shit. He's like a character actor. He pops up in things, but it felt like there was no lead up to him getting to Andy Garcia's character, Laton, I believe is his name, getting murdered by Gustavo is the name of the other well, Gustavo doesn't do the murdering, but he commanded the murdering. He orchestrates it. is that it feels like there is build up towards the relationship with Andy Garcia and Clint Eastwood's character, but that there is no lead up whatsoever to him being murdered and other guys taking over. And we see the other guys for like 2 seconds. It feels like everything slips away. Like they spend a lot of time building up the crest of the wave, and then we get to the top of it and it's just like a fucking cliff.
Yes.
Immediately.
The whole last chunk of the movie is like very rushed. I feel like there's 2 big scenes that like they had planned out that they knew they wanted, which was the making amends with the grandma on her deathbed and the like arrest on the highway, and then like everything else is just so rushed to get to those moments that it feels unsatisfying the way it kind of ends.
Yeah, I think so. If we're gonna talk about the ending, I'll say is this: I think that the Mule pretty effectively builds up narrative tension throughout the first 2 acts of it. We see him getting more comfortable with the guys. There's relationship building. We start to see a shift in his characterization, and then it sacrifices it for 1, sentimentality, and 2, for rushing to the conclusion, like you just said. I think a major problem for me, and like what contributes to this, or is the primary driver of it, is that the growth occurs before the end. The final character growth for Clint Eastwood occurs before the end of the movie. So there is no suspense in the back third. So he rushes to, he dodges his handlers, and rushes to the bedside of the dying Grandma Mary, knows that he's jeopardizing it. That's an expression of, I do care about my family, right? That is the pinnacle of emotional development for him that the whole movie's been leading up to. And now there's like fucking 30 more minutes left in the movie where there is no room for growth. Like we have stunted.
And it's taken away the like, you've accomplished your like mission of the movie. It was like make your family like you again. So the stakes are now gone for the the capture scene or whatever.
That's what I mean. It's just like we get there and then it's like there is nowhere to go except the arrest, which we know has to be inevitable.
Yeah.
I mean, 1, it's based on a true story again, and 2, he's fucking 90 years old. Okay,
and Bradley Cooper's the dumbest cop ever. Where like. The motel scene where like they do the old switch them up and Bradley Cooper like arrests the wrong guy, but that diner scene I did not like. I don't know, it just, I wanted it to be more. I guess I wanted it to be more exciting. I know, and the comparisons are always, but like the Heat scene where they're like they meet in the diner and they have the whole like tete-a-tete, where this one he's just like, hey, don't forget your wife's anniversary or whatever. I don't know. More on like the Bradley Cooper's character of it. Like, I wish at that point in that scene he would have suspected him. I think would have made that scene a little bit more interesting. Where like the way it's written is just like Bradley Cooper just ran into an old man, and I don't know. There's not a lot of tension in it.
See, I think that the dramatic irony is the tension, like the fact that we know and Bradley Cooper doesn't. But also, I mean, I like this scene because I think it drives home the point about like white privilege and presumed criminality, because there is no level on which the law enforcement mind of Bradley Cooper would ever conceive of him as a possibility. And I also think it's interesting because it foreshadows that final emotional journey, like the result of that emotional journey that we see Clint Eastwood on. He, at the beginning of the movie, we see him not engaging his family and not caring about it.
Right.
And then we see him, not being present for his family, but feeling put off by their response to that. Then we see him like making an effort, and there's some grappling with like dealing with the lasting consequences of those many, many years of not making the right choice. And then he's having this conversation and he is fully aware of like, you need to please go make the right choice because I didn't. Then he makes the right choice and reaps the rewards of it, But yeah, it's no fucking Heat, you know.
It's no Heat.
It's no Heat.
It's no Heat. One thing I want to do is, what's our favorite Eastwood family performance out of the... We've gotten 4 Eastwood family performances in these 2 movies. We've got Clint twice, Scott as Trey, and then in this one we get Allison Eastwood as Iris.
This is really like sorting a series of turds. I have to say, by far the best to me is Earl Stone.
Sure.
You know, Clint Eastwood in The Mule. The fucking fall down 4 flights of steps, and then that's where Clint Eastwood's as Walt in Gran Torino is. Then Trey Scott Eastwood in Gran Torino for
the
his
Don
90
Jr.
seconds
of the Eastwood family
is like maybe half a flight down from Walt, mostly because he didn't have enough time to fail.
No, Clint knew. He's like, we can't put the boy on camera for longer than 5 minutes.
And
He'll
then,
fall apart.
Way at the bottom is in the 9th circle of hell.
It's rough.
Next to Satan, and Judas, you know, frozen in the ice, is Allison. I hated her performance in this movie.
It's rough.
It doesn't feel like it's acting to me. Like, it just feels like, and I don't mean that in the way of like it feels so authentic.
Right,
the veracity of it makes
it.
No, it just feels like he told her, like, stand over there and be grumpy.
Right. Yeah. It feels like you know, like when those Hollywood legends like hire their children to be in a movie even though they shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's kind of what
it feels
like.
Just like that.
It feels almost exactly like that.
It feels precisely
I
like
give her a little
that.
bit of slack, but that character is written really poorly too, so she
It
doesn't
is.
have a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Because I also say, like, I like Thais Formiga, but she's not very good in it either because she has like a lot of like carrying the like, but Grandpa, I thought you were gonna do this, and like all the female characters except for
I thought Grandma Mary ripped. I thought she did a really good job.
She didn't at the beginning, but like by the end, especially the like deathbed scenes are like very charming. But the birthday party scene where like everyone's just kind of frantically hollering at each other, I was like, oh, y'all all stink in this. But yeah, she definitely comes off the best of like the other family members.
Yeah, I thought she did a good job, and I'll say this. The granddaughter, I am not a huge fan of hers, and I don't think she's a good actress.
Thais Formiga?
Yeah. I like her in American Horror Story, the like assorted season that she's in, but especially Coven. But I like her because I think she's a little over the top in a way that works for me kind of on a campy level. And she's got like, you know, really big, pretty eyes that, again, work for, I think, specifically the material in American Horror Story, where I don't expect it to be particularly well acted. So it's hard for me to speak to like what is her performance here and what is the writing, because I'm just not terribly impressed by her in general.
Do you know, I was looking it up and I realized I was like, I like her all right. I've barely seen her in anything, and I think when I said I like her, I think what I was getting her confused as is that show Norman Bates, what's it just called? Bates Motel. But that's not her, that's her sister.
Yeah. And Vera, right?
Which I knew she's in it, Vera Farmiga, yeah, but I was thinking that I was like, oh yeah, Farmiga's in it, she's the like girl, like the girlfriend character, but that's somebody completely different. So I don't think I've literally seen Thais Formiga in anything except this and
American Horror Story.
Yeah.
I will say I suspected it, but I wanted to confirm it just because there is several decades of difference. But Grandma Mary in this is also the mom in The Birdcage, which I talked about a couple of episodes ago in our Gran Torino episode, is having recently watched. She plays the mother in The Birdcage.
Did you ever see La Cage aux Folles? The original Birdcage?
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's French. And
imagine that.
my expert pronunciation. I might have it if you. Yeah, I'll look for that later. But yeah, it's also good. There's a really good scene in La Cage aux Folles that I don't remember if they do it in Birdcage, but where he says something about like all straight men are like John Wayne, and he like prances around a restaurant where he's like, okay, yeah.
He, Robin Williams has, it's when he's trying to make Nathan Lane straight.
Yeah.
And so he has him walk like John Wayne, and then he walks like John Wayne, and then goes, "That was good, but like maybe John Wayne just walks differently than I expected or that I remembered." So yes, that is replicated.
Hell yeah. Do we have anything else that we want to add to the Mule?
Well, I just want to talk a little bit about, like, kind of take a step back and reflect on the broader context of the cartels. It's on my mind because I've been thinking recently about a book called The Cartels Do Not Exist by Oswaldo Zavalda. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
So it came out last year, but I think the translation, like the English translation, just came out. And I heard him in May on a TrueAnon episode. Do you listen to TrueAnon?
I've listened to the occasional TrueAnon.
Okay. So I recommend this episode. It came out recently on May 11th. It's episode 290, where Liz and Brace on TrueAnon interview the author. He's a professor at one of the SUNYs, I think, of like Latin American studies. But his book, again, The Cartels Do Not Exist, is about how academics, artists, filmmakers, writers, and journalists depict a kind of post-sovereign, post-state Mexico as if Mexico is like a failed state, which he argues is a historical and an ideological fabrication. So as part of this, and as it relates to his kind of central claim, the cartels do not exist, is he says that an emphasis on cartels is really about constructing an enemy to justify a permanent national security crisis. And thus, action that would otherwise be illegal or immoral is held up as legitimate. In reality, says the boundaries between the state and cartels are much more permeable, and there's no monolith. So there's very few like large individual cartels. It's like a series of a constellation of a bunch of different drug traffickers that they construct as a unified enemy to justify militarization of the police. And that violence is really an outcome of state policing. So it's less like the cartels independent of the state are engaged in violence, and more the interaction between cartels and the state, as well as just the expansion of and militarization of state policing, is what's producing the violence. So he uses the example of outside of Mexico, of the CIA working with the Nicaraguan Democratic Force, or what we, more commonly call as the Contras, who were selling cocaine in order to fund their paramilitary force. As a side note to that, we should watch Kill the Messenger sometime. Have you seen that? No, it's Jeremy Renner. It's Jeremy Renner playing Gary Webb, who's the journalist that kind of broke the story about CIA spreading crack cocaine in black neighborhoods.
InfoWars.
Oh, wait.
I mean, because he's dead, right?
Yeah, I was like, what? He completed suicide.
He was on some OG InfoWars episodes, yeah.
An interesting story with this movie. That movie came out in 2014, which is like 9 years ago. And I went to go see it in the middle of a day on a Sunday alone, and I got ID'd to go into an R-rated movie. Yeah. And the person at the door was like arguing with me about my ID being quote unquote fake. To go see. And here's what I said. First of all, my ID was not fucking fake. I was way over 21. Also, but if a fucking 16-year-old is trying to go see a movie about investigative journalism on a Sunday afternoon,
gotta go see a Jeremy Renner movie, bro.
Let them. Also, I want to say, to go back to Professor Zavala's argument, he says that all of this is an a priori effort to accommodate the expansion of neoliberalism, that the ideas that depopulating territories that are rich in hydrocarbons, minerals, and water opens the energy sector to global capital. So to directly quote from his book here, the war on drugs is a cipher that masks the political strategy of large-scale community displacement for the appropriation and exploitation of natural resources that, if not for the war on drugs, would remain unattainable for national and transnational capital. So there are a lot of ways to engage his ideas. We'll definitely on Twitter thread some of it. You can read his book, Drug Cartels Do Not Exist. There's a recent The Nation article that's an interview with him. You can listen to the recent interview that I mentioned with the author on TrueAnon, episode 290. He's got an article, if you have access to JSTOR, that kind of begins to introduce these ideas called Imagining the U.S.-Mexico Drug War, The Critical Limits of Narco Narratives. He also frequently cites in his book this 1999 UNESCO report called Drug Trafficking in Mexico, a first general assessment by a sociologist named Luis Astorga, that includes a lot of really interesting data on the ways in which like police militarization has generated this problem. So I want to end this discussion, or end our discussion of this film specifically. We'll talk across the movies that we watched from late Clint Eastwood's career by challenging the whole fucking foundation that it rests on. So to paraphrase Gary Webb, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I believe in fucking conspiracies.
Yep.
What about you, Craig?
Yeah. Wait. Go back. Ask me the specific. What were you asking? Do I believe in?
Do you believe in conspiracies?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were asking in context of just these movies or the wider. Yeah, of course. There's a reflection. There's a pithy. Now I'm not gonna be able to pull it, but there's a pithy phrase about that. But yeah, certainly I believe in conspiracies. I think, but I also like conspiracy theories can be fun too. But
you said I'm not throwing out the former. Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say is from a leftist perspective, right? As I mentioned earlier in this episode when we were talking about Samuel Alito's wife, that class interests, how they work is that people who share the same material position have similar interests, and so their behavior can align without explicit conspiratorial thinking.
Right. And I feel like so many times when people like think conspiracy, it's like a bunch of people in a dark room like coming up with a plan, which is like that's not quite what we're talking about here.
Right. Whereas if we are invested in the same businesses, if our capital flows follow similar lines, if we care about similar outcomes, then our behaviors will be oriented in the same direction.
Yeah.
And so basically what the professor is arguing in his book is that the US establishment and assorted Mexican institutions are oriented in the same direction and that orientation produces and produces and or facilitates the violence that's happening at the hands of cartels and at the hands of policing and military organizations in both countries. And again, I'm bringing this up, one, because it's something that is kind of circulating right now that I would encourage you to engage with, and two, because I just want to challenge like the underpinnings of this whole movie, which is that like the cartels are the like exclusive problem. Yeah, and well, because the movie doesn't get into it at all. The cartels could like literally just be like vampires or Frankensteins or whatever. They're just the thing, the scary thing that he gets involved with. Like it could have been anything. Because they're not interested in it. I did have a question though. What are some what's the wackiest conspiracy theory that you're like kind of like I might be in on this? That I believe in. I like them alien ones get me. I'm like I'll do that. I was who are those loggers that they made that movie about? The bloggers? The loggers, the fire in the sky. Did you ever see that movie? No. It's based on a story of these loggers who one dude got sucked up on a spaceship and probed and then returned, and their stories because
they were all like there, so that there's a group of like 8 dudes, so they have like they're each circumstantial, like, yeah, I saw Danny walk over into the field there and I don't know where he went or whatever. So like, and they're all stories like, so I don't know, I'd go with that one.
Sounds legit. Yeah, I agree. Alien stuff I'm more, I would say, more inclined towards.
Yeah.
Now, individual or like specific conspiracies, less so. I do think the U.S. government is hiding things from us.
Yes.
In terms of extraterrestrial contact. I also, I don't know if I believe it, but I am open to the possibility. People that think there's something weird going on under the Colorado airport because it has those crazy ass Mustang
the
sculpture.
statues and sculptures and shit.
Maybe that.
I like
don't
that.
know. Here's my thing is, as I just described, there's a lot of stuff I believe and like firmly believe that there are many regular folks that I would, by which I mean like, you know, folks that are not on the same end of the political spectrum as me.
Sure.
That would call that conspiracy theory. Like a lot of the stuff in a couple episodes, we're gonna watch a movie that we're gonna really dig into neoliberalism, and I think there are some things I'll say in that a regular person might be like, that's a conspiracy theory, but I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I think it's a conspiracy.
Hell yeah.
But I'm not a supernatural person at all. Like, I am an atheist. I do not believe ghosts exist. I do not believe magic exists. Like, any of that shit. So
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff there that I'm like, no.
Yeah. The one that I probably believe is that Bill Gates controls the vaccines, which is why we are proud to endorse Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for our Democratic.
You punk.
That dude is crazy. That guy.
It is.
Why is he putting all these workout videos in his goddamn jeans?
He has to be on, like, okay, allegedly, I'm sorry, this is, it's parody. He has to be on drugs. That is so embarrassing. As someone that has been on like a 9-month fitness journey and has been like really trying and does like post, you know, on my own little Instagram or whatever videos of me lifting weights. Like, if I would never in 1,000 years, you could not, or you could pay me money, but it'd have to be quite a decent amount of money to post a video of me failing at push-ups. Dude, like that.
Those push-ups they're
so bad.
Pitiful.
He's not going all the way down. He's not doing.
He looks like he's doing the worm by the end of him.
He's not going all the way down and up. His elbows bow out instead of going back and being hugged close to him. He gets through 3 of them and starts doing the worm.
Dippy, wavy.
Total
motions.
Core collapse happening. Okay, it's humiliating to me that he posted
cringy,
that.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, and I mean, he's like jacked, but he looked like jacked in like a weird way that like. Well, was listening to a podcast where they were speculating they use.
Oh, he's doing steroids for sure. You can't be that old and that ripped.
I think it was Chapo Trap House because one of them made a joke that his nipples look the exact same as Joe Rogan's. I cannot. And somebody on there, maybe this was a joke. I don't know. I'm a dumb guy. Maybe I fell for it. But they were like, say something that, but like that is an effect of steroids. Is that like it does some weird shit to your nipples that make
that wouldn't. I don't know for a fact that that's not one of the. This like symptoms or side effects that I have, you know, locked in my brain. I heard this
on a podcast and I'm stupid. So.
But it does affect vascular shit, so it wouldn't shock me if there was some impact there. But it's just, I want to make it clear, just in case anyone that like people that don't know me that listen to this, I am not saying it is humiliating to not do a push-up. I cannot do a push-up. I have been fighting and working on it. What is humiliating is doing it for show while wearing jeans and like as an exhibition, as if you believe that this is a display of your strength.
Running for fucking president
while running for president. Yeah, it's that constellation of weird shitty derangement that is humiliating, not being able to do a push-up. If you can't do a push-up, high five me either. Yeah,
pull-ups, nothing, never, not even in a million years.
Oh, don't say a million years. You never know.
In a while, honestly.
Well, if you haven't tried in a while, you're probably not more likely to be able to do it. I did lose like
a chunk of weight in the last couple of years, so I'm wondering maybe at this point.
Maybe. I mean, it definitely, right? I mean, that's the thing about a pull-up is you're pulling up your own weight. It's why there are people that I go to the gym with that are much skinnier than me and just started going and are not stronger than I am, but can do a push-up because they're pushing up, I'm pushing up 180 pounds or pulling up 180 pounds. It's harder in that sense, but like it still requires having muscle mass. So, but I'm just saying it's achievable.
Let's make this a fitness podcast on the next one.
Let's do it.
With me, a guy who goes to the gym a couple times.
I will say a pretty cool thing about being like fat and weightlifting is that there are some lifts that because of like leverage and like the way body weight is involved, I can lift heavier simply because of being fatter. So that's pretty cool. It's pretty.
That shit
it's pretty
scares
dope.
me so much.
It has been one of the best. I will say, like doing a power clean or clean and jerking, those kinds of things, snatching, are very hard and complex. But it's also easier than you think that it will be. Like one of the things I really love about, and this is the last thing I'll say because I know weightlifting is like not a terribly exciting thing, especially when we're not talking about fucking dumbass motherfucker anymore, is that I think that one of the best benefits of weightlifting, which is like well recorded, and anyone who weightlifts is going to be like, yeah, dumb bitch, but I'm speaking to people that don't weightlift, is that the ability to learn something new and to demonstrate to yourself that you can do something, and see incremental progress aligned with your effort and time commitment, its impact on self-efficacy in other realms of your life. So self-efficacy is like the psychological idea of internal competency, right? Like a belief that you can do something, basically. There are other things, like I've started doing pottery class, learning the wheel.
Me too, by coincidence at different places.
Incidentally in a different place. And have I been very good at that in the couple of classes so far? No. Do I feel less frustrated now than if I had tried this probably a year ago? Because I'm like, that's okay. We don't have to be great at something immediately to make incremental progress by trying, by learning about it, by reflecting. So yeah, if you're not someone that moves your body in a way that feels good to you and you want to do that, you should try it. And also we should get strong to overthrow the state.
Hell yeah. Can I tell you a little story from my pottery class?
Yeah.
So I made, my first thing that I made was an ashtray. And it started off as a vase, and then it became a cup, and then a bowl, and then all I had left on the pottery wheel was enough to an ashtray. But like, I got a little edge to it. I even did the little, like, I pulled it up in the middle so you had a little place to ash on, and like it had a nice shape to it. And I was like, okay, literally the very first thing I've ever done on a pottery wheel. And the lady who's the instructor comes over, and she's like, "What are you working on?" And I was like, "Oh, I got a little ashtray going." And she goes, "Oh, no one ever starts trying to make an ashtray." Well,
woo!
You're not wrong,
Read
but also
for filth, pottery
like,
instructor.
damn. So, yeah, she got me. She got me. But I've gotten a little bit better.
Ceramic cunt punt.
I had just showed how I have a tiny little bowl that I made, and then I did another bowl that's getting like fired. That's bigger than this one, but I'm having a hard time going vertical.
The pulling is very
hard.
It's really challenging, and the combination of patience and pressure but not force, like overly applying force, is a delicate balance.
It's
but
really nice.
I think like that's the joy of life, is learning skills that you hone and whittle away at until you go, fuck this, I don't actually want to do this, I don't actually care about it, or hey, this is worth pushing forward on.
Fuck yeah. Do we have anything else for this episode on the Mule?
I just want to say very briefly, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. In fact, like actually throughout the episodes we've talked a lot about intersections, but just kind of reflecting on these late era Eastwood and synthesizing across American Sniper and Gran Torino and the Mule. To me, one of the most uniting themes here and most interesting things is that these movies really acknowledge that masculinity is like a production,
right?
That you know, oftentimes it's almost cliche now. People say gender is a performance. And it's like, gender is a performance, but also gender is a production. Part of that performance is the production of it. And then it has to be adopted and refined. It's policed constantly in the state of, like, we see this with Tao in Gran Torino, where fucking Walt, you know, Clint Eastwood's character, his cousins, his mom, his sister are constantly like, you're not being a man. This is how you be a man. You're doing women's work. Stop gardening. You know, they're constantly picking and, again, like, whittling away at him, and enforced. And that masculinity is actually not a natural state of being. Like, it is something that is created. Yeah. And that's demonstrated across all three of these movies.
For sure. Yeah. And, no, that was beautifully said. I was going to add to it, and I was like, I don't think I have anything to add to that. And just the, like, no, now I'm debating, because now I'm going to add such a dumb guy thought to it, but I'm just like, because that was very elegantly said, but my complaint is, and this fucking version of masculinity is the worst. Like, the one that, like, you have performed for us, and all these is the one that, like, yeah, I know all these guys. I don't like this particular, like, boomer masculinity is so goddamn annoying. And we watched three movies of the same guy, basically.
Yes, 3 movies of kind of just different stages of the life course.
Yes,
and
throw Dirty Harry in there too. That was a good one though.
I think the thing about these movies is, like you said, you hate this guy. These movies are also for that guy, right?
Oh yeah, this is a dad and grandpa movie.
It is. God. All of them are dad and grandpa movies, and I think the kind of interesting thing about them is they're not terribly preachy, by which I mean I don't think they're trying to, not that they're not communicating ideological information, they are, and we've analyzed that through each movie, or that they're not arguing a certain vantage point, which they are, and we've discussed through each movie, but simply that, like, I don't think these are conversion films on any level. They're not didactic. They're not intended to impart lessons outside of the men who are in them.
They're just built on a premise that might be like, hold on, let's examine. They're built on an assumed premise of, like, a version of masculinity or whatever that. But they're not necessarily trying to, like.
And their audience, I think, is those same men.
Those same guys. Yeah.
Versus trying
uncles.
to, like, convert you and me, right? Or some other iteration of people like us. Like, so I think that's kind of an interesting thing, is it doesn't seem like Clint Eastwood is like, I've got an axe to grind. He's just like, I'm playing around in the sandbox that is shitty masculinity.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, like, comparing him, like, let's say Scorsese, you know, two guys that are, like, Scorsese is in his, like, 80s, still thriving, still making what he wants to do, and it's great. And Clint Eastwood's doing the same thing. He's making what he wants to make, and it's not like terrible. He's not doing it for, like, an agenda or whatever, but it's just representative of this version of a weird boomer guy that never really existed.
Yeah, I think it's just largely sublimated.
Yeah.
You know, it's not teeming on the surface. This is just the natural state of being for him, what he conceives of as the natural state of being, even though, as we just discussed, it is not natural at all, and it is very much a production. So, shall we say au revoir to these 3 movies?
Yeah, let's please do, because
maybe we watch, like, a good movie next.
Hell yeah.
Let's flirt with the idea of a good.
Did we already say it? You may have mentioned it in passing earlier, but I don't think you said the title.
Did I? No, I did not. So I will say the next. Well, I won't say the title of the movie. Or maybe I should, because maybe you want to watch it with us.
It's Finding Dory.
God kill me. We're going to watch a movie called Bamako, which is a film in which the IMF and the World Bank are put on trial for neoliberal economic policies, structural adjustment policies that have decimated the global south. So you can watch it on Canopy if you have access to Canopy via your local library establishment, and tune in to listen Oh, no. That will have come out already.
I'll chop it. I'll chop it and put it on the other one. I'll chop it and put it on the other one. Because we basically started saying, like, do we want to tease what's on the next one? So it's I can do it completely independent of it. Well, so just finish what you're saying. It'll the way that we cut it, it'll slide perfectly into the other episode, so it'll be fine.
So check it out and join us to talk about an independent film, and also to hear me rail about SAP, structural adjustment policies.
A movie I have not seen and something I know little about, so I am.
So we'll do a little teachy, and I will get to make use of all of my years as a Model United Nations competitor.
Oh damn! I'm gonna have so many questions about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Hell yeah.
So, do we need like an actual name for the Mule then?
We'll say. Yeah.
So we don't have any announcements about our next episodes yet for the Mule, except to say, keep listening, please. We're gonna have some fun stuff coming up, maybe some fun guests. And if you've got movies that you think that we should talk about, tweet us about it. We may ignore you, but we may not.
Not me. I got nothing better to do than look at Twitter and respond to tweets.
Oh, to be clear, I don't mean ignore you on Twitter. I mean ignore
the suggestion.
Like adopting the suggestion. We reserve the right to ignore adopting any suggestions, but I would love to hear it, and I'm always open to good ideas.
Hell yeah. Well, have we closed the book on the Mule?
I think so. Let's fucking slam it shut.
Toodaloo, the Mule. On the Mule. Goodbye, the Mule. Goodbye, Clint Eastwood.
Good night, Moon.
Please don't die before this comes out, or this is going to be a real different tenor. All right, that's enough for this one before we jinx a Hollywood legend.
Bye.
Bye. Kill the boy.